Today is June 16th, 2011. My name is Ben Shipley, and we are at the Carroll County Arts Council, and I'm here to interview Sandra Oxx, who is the Executive Director of the Carroll County Arts Council. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for doing this interview.
Well, it's kind of exciting to get to put my story on something.
Absolutely. So I guess let's start with tell me your story. Where are you from? What brought you to Carroll County?
You know, I don't really know where I'm from. I grew up in Colorado. Most of my professional career was in New York, but I moved here in 1997 and was looking for a job. Cut a little ad out of the newspaper, and here I am. And at the time I thought, oh, gosh, I've never worked for such a small place. It was in a basement, but it was a job, and I took it, and I never would have known it would have turned into my dream job.
Absolutely. So once you got to Carroll County, and once you began this process of sort of changing the Carroll County Arts Council, what motivations did you have? You know?
Well, when I first interviewed for this job, the Carroll County Arts Council had just been given a home by Dorothy Tevis. It was on the corner of Bond and Green Street, and that was the only thing that made me think there's some future for this organization. There could be an exciting project to get involved in, that there was a prospect of a home, because they were situated in a basement at the time. It was pretty dismal, pretty small. It was only about 1,100 square feet, which is about the size of my office right now. But anyway, they had just been given this home, and I thought that would be an exciting project. Certainly after being here 2-3 years, we started looking at the actual feasibility of using that home as an art center, and there were a lot of issues with turning it into a public space. Fire safety issues. There were so many windows in this beautiful home, it would have been very difficult to hang art. It wasn't really big enough for a performance space, and just about the time when I started getting cold feet about how could we ever turn this home into an art center, I got a call from Tom Baird with the City of Westminster saying the Church of the Open Door was putting the movie theater on the market. Would we want to partner with them? And the timing could not have been better, because, as I said, at that point we were realizing that Dorothy Tevis's generous gift to us just really wasn't practical for a public space. So we dove in feet first with the city as our partner, as our guide, as our safety net, and the wheels turned very quickly because of having the support of the city. The county dove right in with us and secured program open space money to buy the building, because first of all we had to buy it so that we could start planning, and they came up with that money. It was $310,000 that the county was able to make available to us to buy this building. And then we started the fun stuff, gathering people from the community to try to figure out what they wanted in an art center, beginning the fundraising, hiring an architect, looking at design plans. It really went very quickly. In the scheme of purchasing and renovating a building, we were, in and out within 2 years, which is pretty much unheard of considering the massive amount of renovation that this building needed.
Absolutely, and the viewers might be able to see that we're actually in the theater now, mm-hmm. and this is not the exact this isn't the setup that's original, right? This is part of the renovation.
Well, part of it is actually closer to the original than when we bought it. Originally, when it was built in 1937, it was an 850-seat theater. The seats went all the way out to what we now know as the lobby. That was kind of the standard for the day, to have huge movie palaces. But by the time we had purchased it in 2000, it had been chopped up, and it was 2 very narrow theaters divided by a big wall down the middle. They weren't really even configured as theaters. Since a church owned it, they had used it for overflow programs, weekend vacation Bible school sort of things, storage for the Christmas pageant sets. So it really didn't even resemble a movie theater per se. All the decorative plasterwork had been covered up in its multiple renovations, throughout the 1900s. So it it needed quite a bit of transforming to make it a usable public space.
And as you mentioned before, this was owned by the Church of the Open Door. That's correct.
I believe for about 10 years they owned the space.
And before that, it had been completely vacant. Is that right?
Well, there was a period of vacancy. I'd love to know the exact dates of the vacancy. Man, if I could hire someone to find out all these details, I would love to have the puzzle pieces fit in. But it had been a commercial movie theater into the 80s. There were various periods of closing when they had renovated it and chopped it up and made it smaller. But it had been a commercial movie theater.
And it was called the Carroll Arts Theater?
No, it was called the Carroll Theater.
Carroll Theater.
And probably spelled Theater. And as many Carroll Countyans told me when I moved here, they say theater. So we tend to call it our theater too. But it was only a movie theater. There was no stage, there was no backstage. So even though the building looks massive from the outside, it needed a lot of retrofitting to be suitable for performing arts, plays, etc. And I think that you can probably see this stage. It's a beautiful stage, and it's an incredible opportunity in the community for people to start enjoying the arts, but also to build it as a community center. Exactly, and that was the goal. We wanted it to serve a broad spectrum of the community, and not just musicians. We wanted the visual arts in there, literary arts, drama, dance, and with that in mind, it made the logistics even more complicated since we were trying to please everybody.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about what's housed upstairs and how that is that fits into the mission of bringing the community together in this space.
Well, multi-purpose was our key word when we did the renovation process. Upstairs, the Carroll Theater originally just housed the manager's office, an insurance office, and there was just some very small space at the top, and of course Sunday school rooms when the Church of the Open Door owned it. But we actually added quite a bit of square footage to the upstairs by building out over the previous theater seats. We have classrooms up there for camp, yoga classes, Mommy and Me music classes. We have a second gallery. I actually have an office with a door that shuts, which makes me feel like the queen. Additional restrooms up there. So that's been the biggest addition of square footage is upstairs space.
And you mentioned something about the Mommy and Me music, and that sort of reminded me of the fact that this organization actually has a really incredible what you guys call musical instrument.
The bank?
Yes.
The musical, yes.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that, because ever since we own this building, everybody thinks it's about this building. But really, the Carroll County Arts Council is here to support and nurture the arts. And one of the programs that we started actually in 1997 was a musical instrument bank. Teachers were coming to us saying they've got kids who want to be in band or orchestra but can't afford to buy or rent an instrument. So basically what we do is people donate instruments to us. We have funding in place to clean, repair, refurbish them, and then we put them right into the hands of a kid who might not be able to be in band or orchestra without our help. I believe we've given away 370 instruments since '97, and especially in times like this when a lot of parents are struggling economically, it's been such a welcome program. The music teachers love to be able to help kids not have to, say no to being in the music program. So thank you for asking that and making sure people know we do things besides run a theater.
Absolutely. I think that that's an incredible way to reach out to the community, and not only to just sort of, like you were saying, like use marketing because of the Carroll Theater,
right,
and the renovation of that and being so visible on Main Street, but also sort of getting into the individual homes of the people in the community. Exactly.
It's a program that doesn't serve thousands of kids. It serves a couple dozen each year, but the impact is huge. And I've learned great stories from people who come in bringing their instruments. Just for an example, one gentleman came in with a very old trumpet, and he shared with me that he played trumpet in a a band during the war, during World War II, and he met his wife because he was the trumpeter in the band, and stories like that just really touch your heart. And one time I had a mother come in with a clarinet, which is great, but she also had a music stand and books and a metronome and, you know, kind of junk that I at the time I just felt like she was dumping a lot of junk on us. And, you know, I asked her, I said, so, you know, does your child not want to play the clarinet anymore? And she said no, that the child had been killed by a drunk driver in a car accident. And it just made me realize some of these instruments have stories and they have real people behind them. And we've also gotten some great stories of kids we've passed them on to. You know, some have turned out to be good musicians. Some have been awful. I'm sure some of them have been pawned. But there's such a rich storyline with that program that it definitely has a soft spot for me.
Absolutely. So what other kind of programming is the Carroll County Arts Council responsible for?
Well, first I'll touch on the other outreach programs that don't have to do with this space. We give community arts development grants. Right now we give about $35,000 a year out to not-for-profits in the community, the Carroll Singers, the Carroll Players, Masterworks Chorale, Common Ground on the Hill, the Children's Chorus. As I said, our job is to not just present the arts, but to nurture the arts in our community and make sure they have the financial footing to continue existing. In a community like this, a lot of the arts organizations are small, they're totally volunteer run, they don't have development directors and marketing directors and fundraising campaigns, so they're really grateful for the community arts funds. We give college scholarships. Every high school in Carroll County, we give, at this point, $750 to award to their outstanding student pursuing a degree in the arts. That is actually done in memory of Dorothy Tevis, our original angel. And we have the Tom Holder Memorial Scholarship Fund. Tom was a visionary artist in our community who passed away all too soon, but his friends and family donated money in his memory so that anyone who comes to sign up for one of our arts classes or arts camp or children's theater, if the parents have any financial issues, it's taken care of. So I'm very proud of those outreach programs and hope that we can continue running a financially viable theater so that those will be something we can continue to do.
Fantastic. And on the theme of a financially viable theater, what kinds of movies do you show now, and how does that reflect the history of the kinds of movies that were shown here?
Gosh, we show such a variety of movies. I'm not sure how it reflects the history. The Carroll Theater was a commercial movie theater, so they would have been doing first-run things. When a studio releases it, they would run it. Because we're a not-for-profit community center, we really can't do first runs. But I think we probably have the same goal of trying to screen things that are of interest to the public. We have a group called Film Lovers in Carroll County, Flick. They pick most of our movies, and they tend to screen independents, classics, foreign films, things that maybe aren't something you'd find at the movie Cineplex in the mall. We also do free movies in the summer for families, and those tend to be G and PG rated, kind of enjoyable for all sort of movies. But that's a tough one to put our finger on, since it's such a wide variety of movies that are now shown here.
Right, but I think that it was just about last summer, I think, that you were showing Lawrence of Arabia, right?
No, we didn't show that one. It had to be a big class. We've showed some of the sweeping classics like Gone with the Wind and Casablanca. It's funny that you mentioned Lawrence of Arabia. It's on the short list. Everybody always suggests that one.
I thought that I saw it on the marquee, but
no,
maybe it was Casablanca.
But I think Lawrence of Arabia is a perfect example of now the fact that people can get movies so easily on demand on their TVs, through Netflix, whatever. What they want to see here is things that needs the big screen to have impact, or I think people like to see movies and hear audience reaction to it, especially some of the foreign films that's sitting in your living room watching it is kind of weird.
Sure.
But in that, that certainly drives some of our decision making, as to what people want to see. It's tough though, because tastes vary so greatly in terms of movies, that sometimes I feel that the volunteer group is trying to please so many different audiences that from one month to the next it's such a diverse change that we have trouble marketing it. But
yeah, well, and you guys also show Rocky Horror Picture Show, which I
does
going
it have
on...
to go on tape? Yes, we do, and
Yes.
it's so funny because that movie came out when I was graduating from high school, and so it's certainly historic at this point, but it does surprise me how younger generations are totally enamored with that silly, stupid, crazy film. And to see them side by side with people my age enjoying this awful film, it's actually very uplifting, to see the different generations, because you don't see that in most movies. You see it tends to appeal to one age group.
Well, and certainly it speaks to the community aspect of the theater, because if the viewer doesn't know, that particular movie does have this very sort of like communal aspect where there's certain sort of, I don't know what you call them,
Antics.
Yeah, there's an environment, like a like culture that involves a certain amount of like
rice
theatrics.
Throwing and squirt gunning and shouting out words that you wouldn't want your mother to hear. Yes, yes, that's what. And we give everyone the goodie bag with all those props in it, and we have a lot of volunteers on hand to pick up the rice and the toast after the show.
But I think that that's the real beauty of this place, is that it gives people the opportunity that they wouldn't have otherwise. And I
don't think I've ever heard the term beauty and Rocky Horror Picture Show uttered in the same sense, but whatever. Sure. It is a part of what we do. But
I think that that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So going on going from the idea of how you show movies and how that relates to the history of this theater. Mm-hmm. Coming to modern day, you obviously have installed this stage. What kind of theater opportunities do the community have an option of enjoying here?
Well, between movies and live performing arts, the stage is actually used almost 100 times every year. So we're talking huge diversity. About half of the things are things that we produce, or we hire a musician or a band, and the other half is the community renting our space to put on their shows. We have everything from community theater, such as the Carroll Players coming in to do a British farce, a Neil Simon comedy. We'll have Common Ground on the Hill here once a month doing absolute first-rate, world-class roots music. We'll have an occasional singer-songwriter coming through town on a tour. We have an annual appearance by two Celtic rock bands that are always really popular, the Rogues and Barley Juice. We have a big children's play in the fall and in the spring where 50 kids are singing and dancing in Broadway-style musicals. Diversity is definitely what you find here, and we're so glad that we have the community rentals to fill in the blanks and to help our schedule be diverse, because we don't have the resources, to be programming it every day. But the infusion of the local dance teachers renting for their year-end recitals, and the Miss Maryland pageants, and every now and then a meeting, but not too much. I sort of anticipated when we built this place that we'd have a lot more rentals for corporate meetings and business presentations. Unfortunately, it's really been more music, arts, theater, and I'm glad, because that's why we built this place. It's not for church overflow. It's not for public debates, etc. It's for the arts.
Absolutely, and I think that it's a really wonderful thing that the city of Westminster has embraced that mission so wholeheartedly.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I would be remiss if I did not give a huge shout out to the city of Westminster. Without a doubt, we would not be as successful as an arts council had they not partnered with us on renovating this building. They give it to us for $1 a year. They pay the utilities. This allows us to have free movies. This allows us to be able to rent to the community for very modest fees. And they're so forward thinking in that regard that that they started this initiative. But what I would like, people to defend, why the City of Westminster does this. It's not just about the arts, it's about the restaurants that are on this strip, the small stores, the foot traffic that they are bringing to their downtown merchants. The ripple effect of what they've done by investing in this theater, I think, have been far-reaching, and the City of Westminster absolutely should be seen as a model in this regard, and they're the best.
Absolutely. So in 2008, after the presidential election, you as the Carroll County Arts Council organized an event around the inauguration of President Barack Obama. Can you talk a little bit about the decision to do that and also just what it looked like?
Without a doubt, that will probably be, for me, one of the most memorable days here. I was personally elated that this man was elected to be our president, but I knew that the implication to celebrate that in this space was very important, because this theater had been segregated until, I don't know the exact date, but until actually the 1960s. That's my time, even though I didn't live here. It was a great reflection of how far we've come, and hopefully how far we still have to go. But I felt very compelled that we needed to be able to show the inauguration TV coverage on our big screen, because we did have the ability to show live TV. I heard people talking about going to the inauguration. People were saying it was going to be jammed, crowded, and it was going to be very cold. But I sensed that there was a real interest in watching it collectively, watching it not just at your home, but sitting next to someone. And that day, it was a very diverse audience that day. But John Lewis was in the back row, and I glanced at him, and I definitely realized that I can't even begin to understand what that moment meant. I mean, it would be presumptuous for me to say I know how he felt. I don't know how he felt. I don't know how it felt to not be able to be in this theater. So that moment to me was definitely one I will not forget. And I trust you've interviewed him, for him to express in his own words what it meant to him. But seeing his face spoke volumes to me, and I will not forget it. And it helps me override some people who felt that maybe it wasn't the right decision to show that, since we had never shown any other president's inauguration. We'll probably think twice when the next president is inaugurated. But to me, it seemed like the right thing to do, and I'm glad we did it.
Absolutely. If the viewer is not familiar with John Lewis, he is an African-American Carroll County resident and activist, a person who was instrumental in the desegregation of the Carroll Theater at the time. And like Sandy mentioned, there is actually an interview on the Carroll County Oral History site starring him, talking about his experience here.
I would encourage anyone to listen to his words. We're really fortunate to have someone like that in this community. And he and his wife, Jean, were very instrumental in the presentation of the inauguration. I wouldn't want to go on record that it was just a Carroll County Arts Council thing. They, as being involved with the NAACP in our community, were very much behind getting the word out about the event.
Absolutely. And in addition to John Lewis, there's sort of a certain amount of folk legend, but it's a representation of fact that the Baltimore Colts actually had a hand in desegregating the theater.
That's what I've heard, and I hope it's not passing on an urban legend. But some of the ushers from the 60s, have told me that training camp was very different in those days when they were up at Western Maryland College. The players could come and go in the evenings. Now they're all, I don't know, eating protein shakes or something. But they could come and go in the community, and they did enjoy the movies here, and that it was an awkward situation for some of these young ushers to not be able to welcome some of the black players that were their sports heroes into this building. And I've heard that, because of that situation, it became integrated perhaps a little bit earlier than it might have had the Colts not been in town. Right when we started the renovation process, we partnered with the Rotary Club on a golf tournament, and Johnny Unitas was the special guest, and we presented him with a print of the theater renovation that was being planned, because that's where the funds were going towards. And he said, "Oh, I'm so glad you're renovating that theater. I had fond memories of going there." And he said, "But young lady, make sure that the seats are farther apart, because they were never meant for people as tall as me, and I always had to drape my legs over the seat in front of me." And so we did. We made them a little bit further apart just for Johnny Unitas.
So you before we had a conversation, and you mentioned something called Minute Memories, and this is sort of like along the same lines of what you're saying, right?
Exactly, because when we opened this place, I was working 24/7 with everything from paint colors to where conduits were going, that I definitely didn't allow enough time to try to meet as many people as I could that had worked here or had memories of here. But along the way, once we opened, people would stop into my office and say, "I used to usher here," or "I had my first date here," or "I got kicked out once for talking too much." So I did start putting them in the newsletter, and putting just 2-sentence memories of this space for people to share those. And if I had time, I'd love to compile them. And it's interesting because as one of the premier movie palaces in town, there was the State Theater and this theater. It was a lot of people's first date and their first job.
Absolutely, and I think that it's important to talk about the history of the Carroll Theater and the way that it relates to the current face of the Carroll County Arts Council, despite the fact that you do a lot of outreach and programming that isn't necessarily completely linked with this space. Like you mentioned before, there's the Common Ground on the Hill, and there's Art in the Park and things like that. So I guess my big question is, how do you envision the future of the Carroll County Arts Council, either through the things that you plan on doing and the way that reflects the mission, or just where you see it going in the future?
I tend to focus on about a 3-week lead time and what's ahead of me. I would definitely fault myself. I'm not a long-term thinker, but it's working, so I'm not going to change anything. I really think that we're on the right track. There wouldn't be any huge changes, because we are trying so much for variety in programming, involving as many different groups as we can, trying to not do all the programming, but to serve as a rental space as well. So I hope it could, carry on in the same fashion. The one thing that I think the group is going to have to deal with in the future is the Carroll Theater big enough to be separate from the Arts Council? So many people think I'm the director of the Carroll Theater or the Carroll Arts Center. I'm really the director of the Arts Council, where giving grants is the primary mission. Fortunately, we're in good financial shape, so I don't have to make a decision, do we give the children's chorus a grant or do we buy the new microphones? But there's always that pull there for me as to what is the most important thing for me to do. Run this building or support the arts outside of this building. I could see somewhere down the road that maybe the board will have to grapple with that, and perhaps both organizations would be strong enough to exist on their own. It's not unprecedented. The Weinberg Theater in Frederick used to be part of the Arts Council, and then it broke off. So I'm not sure which direction I would recommend it go, but somewhere down the line, I think that's going to have to be put out on the table.
Sure. And the, I think, final wrap-up question that I have for you is this idea that you brought so much to this community, and perhaps you didn't know that was going to be the case when you came to Carroll County. But now the question is, what's keeping you here? Why what is important about this community to you, and where do you see yourself in this community?
I'm a strong believer in fate, karma, whatever you want to call it. I worked at some of the best cultural organizations in New York City. When my husband got transferred here, I thought it was the end of the world. I really did. I really did. I came with a lot of misgivings, and as I said, when I first took the job, I thought, we hand wrote the checks and a little checkbook. I never would have dreamed that I could lead a project like this, and I now feel I could never work anywhere else. I need to retire from this place. This place is my child. I do have a child at home who's a great kid, but this has been my child. I get very defensive when people criticize it. I get very proud when we have victories. I love coming to work each day and getting to provide the creative vision for this place. But without a doubt, it's because it's so well supported by Carroll County. Every single day, someone comes in, says, oh, they love that we're showing that movie, or their kid had a great time being in the play, or they're adding an extra $100 to their annual membership contribution. I mean, who else on their job gets that reinforcement every single day, several times a day? Getting to hear people applaud. I mean, I know that I've got one of the best jobs around, and that keeps me here. I hope the community and the board will keep me here. I can't be here forever, but I certainly want to make sure I leave this place in really good shape, because I do think it needs to have another 100 years of history under its belt. And at the rate it's being supported by the community, I think that's realistic.
I absolutely agree. Well, Sandy, I think that you are a true asset to the community, and I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today.
I was always told you're not a true Carroll County unless you've lived here for 3 generations, so I'm honored to be part of the Carroll County History Project.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.